server, I think we kind of must have hit on the same thing, as if you talked about love as the greatest love of all is the love of self. I did something on that about a month or two ago, so, you know, divine mind has got us working all together. But today, I'd like to talk with you about love of a different kind. And it does have to do with love yourself. But it also has to do with how we rob ourselves of the love that we feel for ourselves. I'm reminded of a story I heard a while ago about, take this down. All right. There was this convention of all the major diseases and ill fortunes that happen all across the world. You had cholera, you had malaria, you had diabetes, you had the Red Death, and they were all getting together to trade stories about how they took lives and how effective they were. And then it got silent because the bubonic plague walked into the room. And everybody was in awe because the bubonic plague was just taking lives all across Europe. So somebody said, that's the bubonic plague, I want to be just like him. And in the back of the room was the lowly colt. He said, I'm not impressed. You're not impressed, why? Because I heard that he only took 10,000 people. What, are you serious? Millions died. Yes, the bubonic plague only took 10,000. Fear took the rest. Fear is probably the ugliest, meanest, nastiest word, four-letter word in the English language. Fear is something that we all face. But the problem that we have with fear is not so much fear itself, it's our reaction to fear. It's how we treat fear and what we let fear do to us. Because we tend to let fear rule our lives, it runs our decisions, and then it ruins everything that we experience because we let fear dictate how we're going to react to life. But we need to instead find that fear is not an enemy. It's not a foe, it's a friend. And if we learn to use fear effectively, fear will improve our lives. But it's that fear that we have of the unknown. It's that fear that we have of things that are going to go wrong and of loss that keeps us held back. Our scripture this morning, or this afternoon rather, comes from Matthew. Matthew chapter 25, verse 14. And if you'd like to follow along, turn to your Bibles. I'm going to be reading from the Lambda Aramaic translation, so it's going to be a little bit different perhaps than what you may have. But that's Matthew chapter 25, verse 14, and I'm going to be reading from verse 30. It reads, "It is just like a man who went on a journey, who called his servants and put his wealth in their charge. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1. To each one according to his ability. And immediately he went on his journey. The one who received the 5 talents then went out and traded with them, and he earned 5 more. Likewise, the second one by trading gained 2 others. But he who received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of these servants returned and took an accounting from them. Then the one who had received 5 talents came up and offered 5 others and said, My Lord, you gave me 5 talents. Behold, I have added 5 more to them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and reliable servant. You have been faithful over a little, I will appoint you over much. Enter into your master's joy. Then the one with the 2 talents came and said, My Lord, you gave me 2 talents. Behold, I have added 2 others to them. His Lord said, Well done, good and reliable servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will appoint you over much. Enter into your master's joy. Then the one who received 1 talent also came up, and he said, My Lord, I knew that you are a hard man, and that you reap where you do not sow and gather where you did not scatter. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. Here is the very one you gave me. His Lord answered, saying, O wicked and lazy servant, you knew me that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter. You should have then put my money in the exchange, and when I returned, I would have demanded my own with interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For him who has it shall be given, and it shall increase to him. But he who has not, even that which he has, shall be taken away from him. And the idle servant they threw into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So now usually when we hear this parable from Jesus, we talk about the talents that we have, about that we should use these talents or they be taken away from us. And that's really a very wonderful and effective message. That's not the one I'm going to be talking about today. I'd like to talk with you about our self-esteem, especially the part where the servant says, I was afraid. I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here is the very one you gave to me. Because it's that fear that causes us to hide our talents, and not just our talents, everything of value that we have. It causes us to hide them, and we miss out on our blessings in life. So before I get into our lesson really good, I'd like to do a little bit of an analysis of the scripture. Because I think that you'll find more of an impact in the story itself if you understand where it's coming from the culture. This is one of those stories that's relatively straightforward, but there's some little nuances to it that, when you understand them, makes the story have a bit more effect to you. So the first thing we have this man, this master, who is preparing to go on a long journey. And he turns his wealth, his estate, over to his servants. So the first thing that I'm asking myself is, why would this man trust his servants to take care of his money? Well, it seems that in biblical times, there was a unique relationship, or a relationship that we don't have today, between servants and masters. You see, the servants were there to provide for the master in exchange for the master provided for them. The master gave them a place to live. The master made sure they had food. The master made sure that they had clothing. If you think that times are hard now, you don't know what times were like back in those days and how hard they were. Because people really had to struggle in order to make a subsistence. They had to work the ground hard, but if you could find a job working for a lord, someone that had money, someone that had wealth, then you were on easy street. Because all you had to do was rely on them. You did your job, and they did their job and provided for you. So there was an understanding between the master and the servants. I will take care of you, and in return, you take care of me. Now there's another aspect of this that you need to understand. Particularly during that period of time in the Near East, men were polygamous. It was legal. It was not looked at sideways that we do in this country. It was perfectly acceptable. It was the expectation that a man of means would have more than one wife. The problem is that each of those women were vying for their sons to take over when the master died. So it was a way of keeping peace between the different factions, the different wives, and the different families. Rather than to give one son or another son something important to do, they gave the job to the servant. That would help to keep peace in the household. Now, if you remember, when King David was alive, he had at least 8 wives, and probably more than that. But Bathsheba was his favorite. Bathsheba's son was Solomon. Solomon was not the one that was next in line to become king when David died. But Bathsheba begged him to please make Solomon her son David's heir when he died. And because of his affection, David relented and gave in. And boy, did it cause a problem. Because the son that was supposed to take over, let's see, let me make sure I have his name right, Adonijah, who was the son of Haggith, he was the one that was in line. He got skipped over. And after David died, Adonijah went to Bathsheba to ask for a favor to get an audience with Solomon. And it was mistaken, the intention behind it, and he ended up losing his life as well as the general Joab. So you see there's a history in the culture of this conflict with all these different wives and their families. So it made sense that the owner would ask the servant to take over. And these servants weren't just regular people that didn't have any skill. There was an expectation that if I put you in charge of something, I know that you have the skill to take care of it. So these servants were not chosen lightly. Each one of them was expected to be able to handle their duties. And they wanted to handle their duties so that they would please their master and be in their good graces. That's why when each of the first two came up with the 5 and the 2 talents, they said, Master, you gave me 5, I'm giving back 2. It's like, me, I'm bad. I can handle my business. I'm looking good in front of the boss. But this one guy was afraid. He was afraid, and it kept him from doing what it was that he needed to do to impress his master. So, getting into the lesson more proper now that you've got that background, there's one other thing that I want to examine with this, and that has to do with the talent itself. Now, as many of you may know, a talent was a unit of money. It's a gold coin that was considered to be about 20 years worth of wages. I did a little bit more digging and I found something even more precise. A talent is 75 pounds of whatever material that's being used. So if the master was giving gold talents, gold today, a troy ounce is worth about $1,250. There are 16 ounces in a pound. So if you do the arithmetic, that's about $1.5 million per talent that these servants were entrusted with. So there had to be a good level of trust amongst the master and the servants to know that the servant would not run off with their property. And indeed they wouldn't, because if they stole or they did anything different, anything with the money that they shouldn't, there would be dire consequences. What ended up happening with this servant, that he was thrown out in the street, that he was out in the cold, that he would no longer have his master's protection, his master's support, a place to live. And that was a very serious thing in those days, because to be out in the street meant almost certain death. And that's why you have the phrase about the gnashing of teeth and the bad feeling that the weeping and the gnashing of teeth that the servant would have. So this landowner was somebody who did not have to work, and that's what the servant meant, that you reap where you do not sow, that you gather where you do not scatter. The master did not have to go out and do that. That was the servant's job to do it. So they've got this understanding, and the servant has disappointed him. And the reason that the servant has disappointed him is because he was afraid. And it's that fear that I'd like to take a look at a little bit more this afternoon. As we know from A Course in Miracles, there are 2 basic emotions. You've got love and you've got fear. Love we associate with God, and love is the only true emotion that we have. But as human beings, believing that there is a separation between us and God, we bring in another one called fear. And as Rev Dev said, false evidence appearing real. It's that belief in something that has not even happened. It's that belief that there's something that can be taken away from us that makes us afraid. And most of us are afraid of fear. We're afraid of standing up to fear and seeing fear for what it is. A thought in our minds of something that could go wrong. And not just something that could go wrong, but something that could be such a huge loss that there would be dire consequences for us if it came true. So when we have fear, we build up this thought in our minds about a loss of something so significant, a loss of something so valuable, that we just don't know what we're going to do if we lose it. And that's what the talents represent. Talents represent not necessarily money, although it could. It represents something of value. It represents something of value to you, something of value to me. And that value can be anything. It can be the love of a relationship. It can be the esteem of a colleague. It could be my health. It could be anything that I place great value on that fear could make me afraid that I would lose. But we need to understand that God, that Spirit has placed within us everything that we need in order for us to prosper and for us to handle any situation that we come in contact with. Fear is a lack of belief in ourselves. Fear is a lack of belief that God has made us in God's image and likeness, and that we will have the ability to handle anything that comes our way. We don't recognize that fear is an opportunity for us to grow and move beyond the man-made boundaries that we've set for ourselves. So when we see fear, we freeze, and we take whatever the object of our desire is, whatever that thing of value, and we dig a hole. We dig a hole, and we dig a hole, and we dig that hole deep, and we put that thing of value in that hole, and then we cover it back up with dirt. We cover it back up with dirt, and we cover it back up with dirt, and then we try to forget about it. And then something comes up that reminds us of that valuable thing that's dirt in the ground. And what do? We put some more dirt on top of it. And then when something comes up, we put some more dirt on top of it. And the next thing you know, we've let our fear has run away from us, and this thing that we buried in the ground is no longer just under a little amount of dirt, but we've got this huge mountain. And we're like, oh my God, there's nowhere in the world I'm going to be able to dig this thing back up. And so what do? We try to ignore it, we try to pretend that it doesn't exist, and all the while that thing is there, and it's calling out to us. Because that thing of value is something that's an energy. It's actually an expression of love that we have cut ourselves off from. Not because God doesn't love us, but because we have not loved ourselves. We have not believed in ourselves. We have not thought that we were capable, worthy, or deserving of having that thing. We were more confident that that thing would be taken away from us than that we would receive the good that we desired, because we did not believe in ourselves. The other servants, they believed in themselves. And the thing that's interesting is that the so-called wicked and lazy servant, he did accept some responsibility for what he did. He said, I was afraid. But he blamed it on the master. It's not me, it's you. You know, if I hadn't done this thing right, you know, you're a hard man. You're hard to please. But wasn't he as equally hard to please for the other two servants? They knew the character of the man, but that didn't bother them. They just went out and they did what they had to do. They took the talents, the thing of value that was given to them, and they invested it, they worked with it, they moved with it immediately. So here's something for you to write down if you're taking notes. One of the first things. When you find yourself in a situation with something of value, immediately invest in it and put it to work. Start to work with that thing of value to develop it. If it's a friendship, if it is a relationship, invest in it. You see, each of those servants took what they were given and gave back as much as they received. And that's what the problem with us is. We don't give back as much as we receive. We want to take, but because we're afraid, we won't give back. If somebody loves you and you value that love, give them back the love that they're giving to you. Maybe not exactly the same way, but give them that same value, that same energy, that same love back to them, so that they know that they're important. When you have someone who's placed trust in you, give them back the value for their trust so that you will receive more from them. Put value into your body. Stop running your body down and not exercising, investing in yourself, sticking stuff in your mouth that's going to tear your body down, but rather start to learn to invest in yourself by eating right, by exercising right, getting the rest that you need, and being who it is that you need to be. We've got all different types of things that we can value, and it's the things that we should value that we seem to take the least amount of care of. And when we find ourselves in a situation where we find ourselves short, where we find ourselves in a situation where we're faced with fear, because we have not exercised that love for ourselves, we find ourselves in a bind, just like the servant did. And so we start to dig that hole, and we dig that hole, and we dig that hole deeper, and we put more dirt on top of it, and more dirt on top of it, and more dirt on top of it, until it seems like the task is so daunting that there's no way that we can dig that thing up. The servant got crippled on two ends. The first was that he was afraid, and so he didn't go out and invest the money the way he was supposed to. But didn't just stop there. He didn't even do the thing that he could do, which was to take the money to the exchange and to let the money lenders let the money out, so at least the master would have gotten some return on it. And I think the master would have been at least satisfied with that. He might not have been so happy about it, but he would have at least known that the servant was looking out for his interest. And that's the problem with us also, that we don't do the things that we're capable of doing, even if we can't do it all. We don't take the time out as an all or nothing thing. It's like, well, can't do that. Guess I just got to walk away from this. I just got to ignore it. And when we do that, we deprive ourselves of the potential blessings that we could receive by doing what we can and trusting that the universe will pick up and do the rest. Like I said, fear is one of the ugliest, nastiest, most vile words in the language. And it's not the word itself, but it's our reaction to it. The thing I think that we fear the most is we fear ourselves. We fear that we're somehow inadequate. We fear that we're not going to be able to meet the test, that somehow that we're not deserving. So the question is, what is it that we can do to face this fear and to be able to move forward and not to bury the things that are of value to us in the ground, but rather to dig them up and to put them to use? So one of the very first things that you can do is to connect with yourself. Connect with the divine self, the presence and power of God that dwells in you on a daily basis. Your spiritual practices are so important that if you neglect them, that's like putting that dirt on something valuable, because that puts a barrier between you and the most valuable thing that you have, which is the presence and power of God that dwells in you. That expression of God that is who you truly are. You put dirt on the most valuable thing that's in your life, the most valuable essence, and you basically are saying, you don't matter to me because I don't value you. And when you do that, you're saying, I don't value me. So make sure that you maintain your spiritual practices, particularly when you're in a situation where you're facing fear, where you're facing challenges. That's especially when you need to do it, that you need to not get too busy, or so busy, that you're running from here to there, that you let your life get out of order, and that you don't reconnect with the love that's in you. You see, we have these spiritual powers, and we talk about them separately. We say that there are 12 of them, but the truth of the matter is that they're all one. They're all 12 different aspects of the one presence and power that runs and governs and rules the entire universe. And when you invoke one, you invoke them all. When you show love for yourself, you're showing that you have faith in yourself. You're showing that you have the will to align your consciousness with the consciousness of the great I am. You're showing that you can use your power of imagination for you to imagine yourself seeing, that you see yourself being, doing, and having the good that you desire. You have the zeal and the passion to be able to move forward to do what you want to do. So work doesn't seem like work anymore, it's just an expression of joy. You have the power to shape your consciousness so that when there's something that you don't know how to do, you can learn what to do. You can develop the understanding that you need to develop in order to be able to move past the limitations that you have. And that's what the fear is. It's like, I don't know if I can get past this. You learn to renounce the things that you don't need. And then you learn to live by developing the wisdom to know what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. So in Spirit family, love is the antidote for your fear. When you find yourself in a situation where it feels like that you've got this responsibility and that fear is going to get the best of you, take a step back and say, this is not the truth of me and who I am. I am living truth, a spiritual being made in the image and likeness of absolute truth. And that in order for me to show the divinity that I am, I must be living my truth, even in this situation. In Spirit family, have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful week. Peace and blessings to all of you. I love you.